It was 15 terrible minutes of fire and ice, a dogfight over rugged Norwegian fjords in the last winter of the Second World War. 10 Allied planes shot down by Nazi gunfire, 14 young airmen lost, and the remnants of war scattered to the bottom of the sea. 60 years later, the frigid fjords still guard the secrets of that awful afternoon. To learn what happened in the air, we have to go deep beneath the water. Now, a marine archaeologist has come to discover the story of Black Friday for himself, before it disappears forever. In Europe's far north, on the coast of Norway, the spectacular fjords are shrines to the glaciers that carved them, deep and clear, dark and calm. This remote corner of Norway only witnessed 15 minutes of combat in the Second World War, but still bears the scars 6 decades later. It was here that the German destroyer Z-33 took refuge. And it was here that Allied airmen sought to destroy it, Friday, February 9th, 1945. A strike wing of 42 Allied planes, mostly Bristol Beaufighters, came swooping in from their base in Scotland. But the German Focke-Wulf 190s had caught up with them.
The sound, I will never forget it. It was like thunder. I was wondering what it was, because I've never seen so many planes before.
10 planes, 9 of them Beaufighters, blown out of the sky and scattered across the woods and water. 1 Beaufighter landed on the ice. 4 planes slammed into the rugged terrain, and 5 plummeted into the frigid waters of the fjords. 14 Canadian, British, and Australian flyers were killed. The locals call it Den Svarte Fredagen, the Black Friday. Inspired by the airman's sacrifice, one of the world's leading underwater archaeologists has taken up the torch. Canadian Rob Rondo has flown across the Atlantic, searching for the 5 planes which crashed into the fjords.
This project is more a labor of love, and most of the people that are involved are either volunteers or people that are sponsoring the expedition, because they're very passionate about this story. And I think it's a story that more people, both here in Norway and really the rest of the world, especially Canada, need to know more about. My name is Rob Rondo. I'm a marine archaeologist. I'm also a commercial diver, and I've been doing this for almost 20 years now.
Rob has come to Norway to pry clues from the carnage of Black Friday from the frigid fjords.
What I'm finding now especially is we're losing most of our veterans from the Second World War. And really this is the time or the opportunity to get these stories written down, to record the artifacts associated with that period, because in another 30 years it's going to be too late.
For Rob, the only way to discover the stories of the men blasted out of the sky is to dive deep into the fjords where they fell.
I think in terms of aviation archaeology, this would probably be one of the most important sites in the world, because it's the only site where you have so many planes from the same squadron that all went down in one confined area, and that you had such a large loss of life. The other thing too is that this is still a relatively remote part of the world, so we'll be the first people to actually encounter these wrecks since they actually went in.
Rob hopes the icy waters have preserved the Allied Beaufighters as well as they did this German Focke-Wulf 190. It was ditched in 1943 and was hauled from a fjord decades later. The Nazi fighter is now destined to become a museum piece in the little village of Herdla.
Yeah, and you can make out the cross.
Mm. And we have the tail.
What we're looking at is the center fuselage with the wings, but these are the tires. The tires are still in their original position. And you can see here, they're still full of air. So there's the tire rim, there's the tire. If you look over here, you can still see the tire. You can still land on these tires. And if you notice, there's no tread on them whatsoever. You poke in there.
We have the tail.
That's really remarkable. Look at that. I see. Actually, I'm surprised that you don't have more marine growth. Wrecks in general don't survive. Airplane wrecks in general don't survive very well. A lot of that has to do simply with the conditions. If you've got warm water, especially aircraft aluminum, it deteriorates very quickly. So we have the excellent state of preservation that exists in these northern latitudes.
February, the calmest season to dive, in search of Allied planes. It's also the anniversary of Black Friday. On the shores of the fjord, Rob Rondo assembles his team. Underwater wreck specialist Mike Fletcher, underwater cinematographer Dave Gadet, and local dive expert Tore Solbakken.
It's important to remember the history and not forget about things that happened before, and honor the people that helped us. So I feel privileged to be on this mission to find it.
Rob has been planning this trip for months. He's traveled thousands of miles to discover and document the planes which sunk in these icy waters 60 years ago. He'll dive down to the wrecks of 5 Beaufighters, where 6 Allied airmen died. The remote village of Ferda has no dive shop, no place for Rob to rent equipment. But the locals are keen to help Rob discover the truth about the day the war came to their town. The fire department comes to Rob's rescue, loaning tanks and a compressor for the dives.
We're putting air in this cylinder. This is the cylinder that I'll be diving with today. This is a very elaborate compressor, very sophisticated compressor for a fire station. They normally don't have to fill to this pressure. I've never seen a community get behind a project, so much. And it's really gratifying, to see people have such an appreciation, both for the local history and also for archaeology. That's right, yeah.
For his first dive, Rob's headed to the wreck of the British Beaufighter PLY, flown by Pilot Officer Percival Smith and Navigator Pilot Officer Spike Hawley. On Black Friday, 2 Luftwaffe fighters pursued Smith and Hawley. The steep hills surrounding the fjord offered nowhere safe to land. Smith had no choice but to ditch the Beaufighter and abandon it in the freezing water of the Firda Fjord. Both men survived the Black Friday battle.
Have you bolted for the surface?
Rob is relying on local lore and eyewitness accounts to find the wrecks.
Hello?
Är det långt härifrån?
Den dagen husker jeg godt, jo.
Ja, det gjorde det. He remembers it, he says.
Okay.
Vi gikk ut Stafjorden, og der stod røyken ut, og det styrtet borti.
One of the planes went out that way. That's probably the one we were going to die on Wednesday.
Okay.
He said the smoke was coming out of the plane and it went down.
Okay.
So he was watching that
Okay.
when it happened.
Local divers like Tora have known the location of this Beaufighter for years, but they've kept it a closely guarded secret, keeping looters from plundering the historic crash site. The form of the Beaufighter slowly emerges from the shadows. "25 meters down, Rob finds the fighter hidden for 60 years beneath the icy waters. Because this fighter sank in one piece, it remains remarkably well preserved. A large portion of the wings, once spanning nearly 20 meters tip to tip, remains intact. A cowling still conceals the workings of one of the Beaufighters' twin engines, now silent for 60 years. But time is taking its toll. Thinner parts, such as the tail fin, are rusting through and falling apart.
She stayed up pretty well in the last 3 years, but you can see parts. Okay, that's good right there. You hear? Yeah. The most noticeable thing is the fin. The tail fin has fallen over, and you can see it was really light.
Yeah.
You can really see that now that she's really fragile.
Well, it's been 63 years, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks to the tip from Tora, this wreck was easy to find, but it's doubtful Rob's luck will hold on the next 4 dives. Most of the Beaufighters were shredded by enemy gunfire, and no one knows exactly where they fell. To discover the rest of the wrecks, he'll need the instincts of a crime scene investigator and the memories of eyewitnesses who saw the planes go down in smoke and flames. On February 9th, 1945, Egil Heimeland was only 6 years old. The dogfight lasted 15 minutes, but the memory seared into his mind for more than 60 years.
Here's me, I'm a 6-year-old, and I happened to see all the plane came right above me. I was solving ice on the river. I drew this just to remember. And after the fight started, I remember many planes in the air. I was hiding beneath a tree. And here is the last German above us when the combat was over. He looked through the glasses. I remember his eyes through his glasses, so close it was he.
High above the fjord, on a hillside where 3 Allied airmen died, Egil has built his own memorial to the flyers of both sides.
The plane was coming through the wood here, and all the trees were cut like small matches. And the cockpit, Nathan Lewis, was stopping at this area down there in the valley. And the plane had rolling around 600 meters from the top of the hill before it stops here. And this is pieces still remaining from the Beaufighter. This from the engine, yeah. Yeah, it must be something from the seat. Yeah, yeah.
The oral history and fragments found by the Norwegians provide crucial clues to archaeologist Rob Rondo.
Look at this. You see these?
This is from the Beaufighter.
Yeah. Unreal. And it's in this good a condition. Like, are there bigger pieces?
Yeah, no, there is many pieces in the wood. We really? Throwing back many pieces.
Wow.
Fragments of fighter planes once scattered across the countryside have found a home here. This family barn has been converted into a museum commemorating Black Friday.
So this here is the steering wheel. So this is found up in the woods. Some of the plane dropped the ammunition up there.
The museum sits high above the fjord, overlooking the exact spot where the German destroyer sheltered against the wall of the fjord on February 9th, 1945.
That photo has generated that the pilots who, when they came back here in the 80s and wanted to ask questions about the Black Friday and get answers to all of their questions, they came to the farm and wanted to see the spot where this photo was taken from.
For decades, veterans of the raid and families of the men who died here would come to reflect and remember.
It needed somebody to tell the story beyond. And that wouldn't be done by the big institutions in the world. That's why we thought it was a good idea to place a museum like this here, to have a place to go to. And the best place to go to is where the action took place.
But these scraps of metal aren't enough to tell the whole story of Black Friday. Rob Rondo has come to Norway to discover what became of 5 of the Allied planes blasted out of the sky and into the fjords.
There's a lot of work. The thing that I'm very pleasantly surprised is to see that there is as many artifacts as there are.
He's already found the wreck of one Beaufighter, piloted by the British Smith and Hawley. Today, Rob hopes to pinpoint the Beaufighter EOV. It was piloted by Canadians, Pilot Officer Bill Jackson and Pilot Officer Bill Blunderfield. These 2 men were known to friends in the 404 Squadron as the 2 Bills.
The pilot and navigator from this plane were never recovered. So it would be, for me anyways, it would be very gratifying to find some evidence of them.
To find the wreck of Beaufighter EOV, Rob is counting on a tip from Norwegians who know these waters better than anyone else.
I found it particularly interesting because I had a Norwegian fishing boat, 2 local fishermen, pull up beside, and they started speaking to me in Norwegian, and they were quite surprised when I spoke English to them, and they said, you look like a Norwegian. So I took that as a very strong compliment. And they also helped with the location, and they said, oh yeah, we've caught our nets all the time in this area, and they actually pointed out some spots.
Rob's crew rigs a small portable sonar device to help them search the bottom of the fjord.
We have to somehow get power here close to the steering wheel. We think we have it figured out, and it's down to 50-50 chance we're going to blow a fuse now. You feeling lucky?
Yeah.
Okay. It's an effort of United Nations here.
It is.
Norway versus Norway.
Yeah.
Eureka! All right.
Woo! We got it.
All right.
On February 9th, 1945, Blunderfield and Jackson were part of a 42-plane Allied squadron ordered to seek and sink a German destroyer in the Firda Fjord. The German ship is tucked against the steep walls of the harbor. The Beaufighters come in too far south to make the kill. The Allies have to pull away and fly in a figure 8 to reposition. Some reports say it takes as long as 13 minutes, giving the German fighters time to catch up and take the Allies by surprise.
Just about everybody that was on my right side got shot down.
Bert Ramsden, the last surviving Canadian Black Friday pilot, has spent 6 decades trying to make sense of that dogfight.
And it seemed to us that the fighters came in just about as we were coming in, so we got the worst of the fighters. I'm pretty sure that most of them that didn't get caught by flak were caught by the fighters.
German records claim the 2 Bills plane is attacked from above, loses its tail, and explodes before hitting the ice-coated water. Blunderfield and Jackson were thought to be the first casualties of Black Friday. They were also Bert Ramsden's best friends.
I was particularly close to them. We went on holidays together, and it was a terrible loss to me.
If the German account is correct, Beaufighter EOV may be completely shattered, in pieces strewn along the ocean floor. The team will be searching for bits of metal or fabric, anything to identify the missing Beaufighter. They head out to the spot where the fishermen snag their nets and turn on the sonar.
We're approaching the site where it might be, where people might have seen it go down. Mike, I think I want you in there. Can you see anything that looks like?
They're boulders, right? You can see shadows on them.
Yeah.
This is all looking good.
It records a hit. Tora marks the exact spot with a satellite global position system.
292641 north.
Whatever's lying on the bottom is just over 40 feet down. That's well within the reach of the experienced dive team, but the surface temperature is only 37 degrees. And there's a rip in the dry suit that protects videographer Dave Gaudette from hypothermia.
Take a look. Feels awful loose.
It's ripped.
I was so gentle when it came
Now,
on.
you could probably still dive as long as you don't flood your hood. Did you get your hood wet?
Yeah, I got to cut in the top fit because, in fact, it's...
well, you're not diving then.
If the wreck of the Beaufighter is down there, Rob wants a complete video record of the discovery. So he gives up his own dive suit to the cinematographer. The bottom of the fjord is littered with shards of twisted metal. They've found the lost Beaufighter, or at least what's left of it. It looks like the German reports were true. Hundreds of fragments are scattered across the bottom of the fjord. Many pieces are unrecognizable. Some are more obvious. This isn't just another wreck. It's also a gravesite. Bill Blunderfield's body was found floating on the fjord's surface after the crash. Bill Jackson went down with his plane. But after 6 decades, there's no trace of him at the wreck site. As Mike records the scene, he and Tora realize that Dave, the other cameraman, is not with them. But what they don't know is he's back on the boat, weak and shivering.
Suit filled up. As soon as I went in, shot 35 minutes of short footage. Okay. All right. Here we go. You want me to pull it? I'm just going to see if I can...
Rob's dry suit is too big for Dave and flooded the moment he hit water.
Oh, yeah, you were flooded. Yeah, I was flooded right when I got in. Yeah, right down the legs. Sure.
The close call for the cameraman spoils any celebration over finding the missing Beaufighter.
Everybody's out of the water?
Huh?
Anything else? Oh, no, man. I'm all right now.
And reminds the crew that the deepest and most dangerous dives are still to come. So far, Rob has found 2 of 5 Allied planes which sunk in these icy waters. British pilots Percival Smith and Spike Hawley ditched their Beaufighter just before it sank. Bill Jackson and Bill Blunderfield's plane exploded after being blown apart by Nazi fire. Now Rob is looking for a Beaufighter which has never been conclusively identified. On Black Friday, 2 planes are on the left wing of the Allied attack force, right in the path of the incoming German interceptors. They're hit. One plane explodes in midair, wreckage raining down into the fjord. The other slams into a forested mountainside, disintegrating on impact. The airmen piloting these planes are Flying Officer Rex Myrick and Pilot Officer Claude Burgess in one, Flying Officer Charles Smirnos and Flying Officer Norman Cochran in the other. What remained of their bodies was never identified, and nobody knows which plane was which. This dive holds special significance for Rob. He promised Canadian pilot Rex Myrick's sister he would find her brother's final resting place. Rob thinks this could be the spot where one of the Beaufighters crashed. It's close to shore, but the fjord's underwater walls are just as steep as the mountains towering above it. The water is 130 feet deep, at the limit of conventional scuba gear.
What it may be is it may be the reservoir for the wheel.
Because of the extreme depth, Rob gets some help from a commercial dive outfit. They've surveyed the scene with a remotely operated camera. It's found bits of twisted metal on the bottom.
So there you go. So there's the armature, there's the wheel rim. There's no rubber.
The tire's gone?
Yeah, the tire's gone. And it looks like there's a big stone.
But Rob can't be sure it's the Beaufighter wreckage without going down himself.
That's all very good. We want to try to find serial numbers associated with the plane, serial numbers from parts that wouldn't have been interchanged. If we can even identify a site with one of those 4 individuals and say, now we know where these 2 crew members are or where they were, that will give some sense of closure to the descendants of those individuals. And it also sort of closes the book on 2 lost missing crewmen.
It's not a well-known battle outside Norway, but the people here have never forgotten Black Friday. The national broadcaster and local newspapers come to watch Rob's search for the wreck.
The response has been overwhelming in Firda and all over the west coast, and it's been in the paper almost every day. Everyone's very interested. I've had lots of calls from old people who saw many of the planes fall down.
Eyewitness Egil Helmeland joins the team as well.
Can I just ask you, like, what do you think are the chances that you might succeed in what you're trying to?
Good. We have a very good chance. I would say 80 to 90%. But in diving, it's never a guarantee.
I know we saw the tail wheel, we think, in the video.
Yeah.
And I know that the 1 set of numbers is near the tail, so is that maybe a prime area, or?
It could be, but I think what we've got here, I suspect that what it is it's this.
Oh, okay.
And it's folded up underneath the wing.
The wing.
So what's the signal you're going to give that we're going to know if you found the numbers?
You'll know. Trust me. yeah. I'm sure there'll be some expression.
At this depth, the team will only have 20 minutes on the bottom. That's not much time to document the wreck and look for identifying marks. When the team finally hits bottom, there's a tantalizing clue. A rubber tire stripped of the landing gear. It's a treasure trail of debris, leading to the core of the plane. But the slightest touch of the seabed stirs up a storm of sediment. This is one of the Beaufighter's 1,600 horsepower Bristol Hercules engines, among the most powerful of its era. They find the landing gear, still tucked inside the casing. It was never deployed as the plane tumbled out of the afternoon sky. They can still see black and white paint on a few shards of twisted aluminum. But they're stirring up too much silt to see anything else. And the dive team has run out of bottom time.
Oh, Yeah, it was good. We saw some sections of the engine, which was very positive. We weren't able to record actually any serial numbers because there's quite a bit of corrosion and marine growth on them. Also, we saw some of the wheels. Of course, we didn't see any visible numbers, but as I said, there's some good sections that, so we're gonna have to do more diving. We may actually have to bring some parts up.
Rob wants to bring up pieces of the plane to look for any markings, but that means disturbing the airmen's graves. He'll need permission from authorities on both sides of the Atlantic.
In this case, we are dealing with Canadian planes in Norway. So that was why I had to contact the 404 squadron to essentially get permission from them to bring up, for example, the tail wheel.
3 days later, with permission from Ottawa and Oslo, the team gears up once again.
Everybody's manifolds are open?
Yeah, mind you, I'll tie this off on a piece of the wreckage. I'm hoping the rear tail wheel.
After 60 years submerged in the Firda Fjord, the wheel casing is too fragile to be transported, but the wheel assembly looks sturdy enough to remove. A parachute-shaped airbag provides the lift needed to carry the wheel 130 feet to the surface. There could be identifying markings buried under the rust and corrosion. But the real prize is something Tora saw while on the bottom.
Can I tell you something?
What's that?
I thought I saw an E.
Really?
An E.
Tora saw the letter E on a fragment of tail section. That could only correspond to tail numbers on the Beaufighter belonging to Myrick and Burgess.
There's only one E, and there's one T, so it has to be this plane.
Yeah,
This is American Burgess's then. Yeah.
Rob has made good on his promise. This is the final resting place of Canadian Phil Myrick, known as Rex, to family and friends. And that means it was Smirnos and Cochrane whose plane slammed into the mountainside.
That's been a great accomplishment because now we'll be able to give a sense of closure to the families.
The wheel assembly is headed for the Black Friday Museum. Rob has run out of time and money for this trip. For now, he has to say farewell to Norway and the Beaufighters mystery. But he'll be back in 4 months to continue his search.
This expedition has exceeded my wildest expectations, and we're going to continue to look for more planes.
Summer on the Firda Fjord. Rob Rondo has returned to Norway to find the last 2 of 5 Beaufighters which fell into this fjord on Black Friday. Now Rob is looking for Canadian Beaufighter EOQ, piloted by Flying Officer Harry Smook and his Navigator Pilot Officer Alan Duckworth. It crashed just offshore, at the foot of a sheer cliff. Egil Helmeland has collected an account of the crash from other eyewitnesses. Working from shore, Egil tries to steer Rob's crew to the crash site.
He was taking his bicycle the next day and remembered a big hole in the ice.
So what we're going to do is we're going to basically treat this as a wall dive or a very steep incline. And what we'll do is we'll dive in a line and we'll actually just work our way down the slope.
The wall of rock extends more than 650 feet straight down. It's a difficult dive, working against the nearly vertical underwater face of the cliff. Rob's hoping the crevices and cracks on the cliff will have caught some pieces of wreckage. They find something, but it's wedged into the rock face. Rob believes what he found is a piece of the smoked Duckworth Beaufighter. But he figures the rest of the wreck fell 650 feet to the floor of the fjord, and Rob doesn't have the gear to dive down that deep.
And I'm sure that it's basically the start of the debris trail. I could see some things off in the distance. But we were right at the edge for where we could go. Yes?
Into
Straight
that,
towards against the Tonsei.
Rob hopes he'll have better luck searching for the Beaufighter piloted by Australians Flight Lieutenant Bob McCall and his navigator, Warrant Officer Les MacDonald. They nearly made a clean escape from the Firda Fjord, but were hit on their way out above the North Sea. Once they took fire, McCall and MacDonald had no choice but to crash land on the water and ditch the plane. Both men were taken prisoner by the Nazis, but were later freed and survived the war. Because the plane sunk in one piece, Rob's hoping it will still be intact. This man's father saw the crash in 1945. He's sure he knows the spot where the fighter fell.
My father saw it came down inside that island there.
Inside?
Yes.
Okay, so...
That's what he told me.
Okay.
That is a small island. No,
yeah. So when you say inside, you mean on this side?
Yes, inside is this side.
Okay. This makes a lot of sense because I read Bob McCall's his journal.
Yeah.
And he said that the Germans, to signal the Norwegian boats, they fired a gun.
Yeah.
And they could hear it. But if the plane crashed over at Trevusjere, I don't think they would have heard the gun.
No, I don't think so.
I believe that it's probably right in this area here. The only disadvantage is this is deeper water. So now we're getting into 66 meters, so now we're in 180 feet, 200 feet of water. It's still very diveable, but of course the shallower the better.
It's getting deep at the north of this.
Yeah, well, planes are never where you want them to be.
No, for sure. What will be the search area for tomorrow?
Okay, very good.
Using the eyewitness account and a satellite global positioning system, Rob and his crew make their way out to the North Sea. With such a wide search area, Rob uses every technology he can get his hands on. A side-scanning sonar system is deployed. Bouncing sound waves through the water to produce a picture of anything on the ocean floor.
We have a vision on both sides. Yeah.
Okay, take it back down and do a little more sonar.
A camera on a remote-operated vehicle lets Rob scour the bottom for wreckage without using up his precious dive time. But it's all for nothing. After exhausting all the time he has for this Beaufighter, Rob has no choice but to concede defeat. Finding a wreck in the open water will require more time and money, and Rob is running low on both. The 2 dives on this trip have been marked by frustration and failure. The next morning, a local hunter takes Rob high into the hills above the fjord. This simple carving marks the place where one of the Beaufighters slammed into the mountainside.
We're seeing carving made by a local farmer. He did it in the spring of 1945, and it's the Beaufighter. The carving is made by a chisel and a hammer, and he painted it at first, and then people have been repainting it. So it was repainted last summer. He was one of 2 Norwegian which was forced by the Germans to clean up the site with the body parts and that stuff. And it made a huge impression on him. He never talked about it, but he made the carving, and that's his statement about the thing would happen.
This really, in many ways, is the first memorial stone to Black Friday.
Rob hasn't been able to track down every plane which crashed into the fjords, but he has discovered more about Black Friday than was ever known. Before Rob Rondo's first trip to Norway, no one knew which plane this carving memorialized. It was either Myrick and Burgess or Smirnos and Cochrane. Now Rob is determined that this is the spot where Smirnos and Cochrane died. But there is nothing to remember Myrick and Burgess. Rob decides they deserve a memorial of their own. Rob has searched the world for eyewitnesses, family members, and military officials to watch him pay final tribute to 2 pilots whose fate was unknown. Until now. A handful of those people have come halfway around the world. Rob's work has inspired them and resurrected memories buried for more than half a century. Bert Ramsden is the only Canadian pilot from Black Friday still alive. At 87 years old, Bert has come back to the scene of the battle to pay last respects to Rex Myrick and Cloud Burgess. This stone plaque will forever mark their final resting place. The 404 Squadron, which lost 11 men on Black Friday, has donated the plaque and sent representatives from their base in Nova Scotia, Canada, for this historic moment.
It's quite rare. That's, you would think after 63 years, pretty well everything would be known. But people that have a passion for history and family want to know exactly what happened. And people just want to know what the final moments were. And so it is. It's a pretty rare occasion.
For 60 years, Bert never spoke about the day his friends were blown out of the sky, until Rob Rondo found him. Bert's son never knew his father was a war hero.
Dad didn't talk a lot about the war for many years. I knew he flew in a Mosquito and a Beaufighter, and he was a hero. And so were those who flew with him, and especially those who perished.
In the chaos and cacophony of battle, Bert caught a glimpse of school children watching the dogfight. One of those watching was Egil Helmeland, then just 6 years old. The old flyboy trades stories with the Norwegian who watched him narrowly escape death so many years ago.
I thought, well, if I go towards the bank, the cliff there, where the destroyer was, they won't follow me because they'll probably hit the bank.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and I knew I could miss it.
Yeah.
A lot of things were going on.
Betty Russell was just a teenage girl the day her brother, Canadian pilot Rex Myrick, was shot down and died in the Firda Fjord. Rob delivered on his promise to Betty, find the place her brother died. And now the memories come flooding back. Memories of a day 60 years ago she's tried to force from her mind.
I don't have a lot of memories of it other than friends tell me we stood around a water fountain in high school and cried when we got this news. I don't remember that. I think I blanked it out. My mother kept a journal, and the journal was blank for about 6 weeks after that. She just said Rex, news about Rex, and then that was the end of it. That's the way we knew that she was grieving. So. But there wasn't an outward sign.
As Rob prepares to take the plaque 130 feet down, a remote-operated camera is lowered into the water.
We can see you, Rob, on the screen. Over.
Betty and Bert watch from the boat as Myrick and Burgess's watery grave finally receives a headstone.
The emotions were very high. I was glad, though, that Betty Russell was able to be there and have a closing effect on what she knew about her brother.
But for Bert, his trip won't be complete until he sees the Firda Fjord the way he remembers it. Once airborne, the pilot hands over the controls. It's been 60 years since Bert flew above this fjord.
It was a thrill to go up in a plane again over that area, but the memories were pretty vivid looking at it from the air, because we pretty well were in that height and at the time of the strike. So it was pretty vivid and quite emotional. Yeah.
As Rob's time in Norway ends, the 404 Squadron pays tribute to their fallen comrades.
You can feel the grief of those gathered to remember the dead of Black Friday attack. It is stunning to a Canadian like me to realize the honors you bestowed upon our comrades who perished that day.
Memories fade, eyewitnesses pass away, and the archaeological record slowly crumbles. The story of Black Friday, virtually unknown outside Norway, might have been forgotten if not for Rob Rondeau.
You can tell by seeing Betty here and Bert here that this still touches a lot of the families back home. If it's not for people like Rob going out there, getting into the water and trying to find this stuff, that this history would be forgotten. A lot of the parents are passing away now, but the kids and the grandkids are picking it up, and he's really helping to carry the torch and keep this history alive.
You know, really, it's about knowledge, and with knowledge comes both understanding and also power, and hopefully the next generation, or upcoming young Canadians, will be empowered to take issues like World War II more seriously. And again, it's the old story. If we don't understand where we've come, we won't understand where we're going.
Rob plans to return to Norway. He won't give up until he's found the final 2 planes. But he's already learned more about Black Friday than was ever known before, and made sure Black Friday and the men who died here will never be forgotten.